All right, good morning. We're going to call this meeting of the Denton County Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting to order. It is 10 a.m. and we do have a quorum. First up is the invocation. Jody, would you mind if I spring this on you?
No problem.
I appreciate you, sir.
Please join me in a word of prayer. Thank you, Father, for this opportunity to come together as a board of directors for this organization. Thank you for the opportunity to serve the people and allow us and to fulfill that role. And if you would please help us do your will for the people of the DCTA and the transit of Denton County, Lord, and just be with each one of us through this weekend as we face this winter weather, and keep each one of our family members and our friends safe. Lord, keep those less fortunate to keep them safe and find a safe haven for them to find warmth during this severe weather. Lord, also we ask that you be with those serving abroad, our military, our police and firefighters, Lord, and our public safety personnel during this time. In your name we pray. Amen.
Ms. Crane, would you mind leading us in the pledges?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one faith under God, one and indivisible.
All right. Next up, Mr. Christina, you've got some introductions for us.
Sure. Morning, everyone. Good to be with you. A couple of introductions. First out we've got Mr. Jim Coffey and Mr. Alex Parker, our partners from the University of North Texas with us. So we welcome them. Thank you. And then if I could have Mr. Derek Sibley come up to the front. Really pleased to be able to introduce to you Mr. Derek Sibley. He's our new Vice President of Finance. Born in Kansas, raised in East Texas, 20 plus years in school, public finance. To say that his hire was a team sport, I think would be an understatement. We had Mr. Leininger at the table with us. Our chair and vice chair were kind enough to help us out. And then Jane Flarowitz and Lakeisha Williams also, and unanimously found Derek's experience and work approach to be totally in line with our agency. And so we're glad to welcome him aboard. So thank you, Derek. I appreciate it. And you'll get to hear from him full on next month with his first 90-day update. So his 90-day update in 60 days on the job. So, right. It's gonna be real good. Thank you.
Next up, do we have anybody for public comment? No. All right, next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. Weren't any items on the consent agenda that anyone wants to pull? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. All right, regular agenda. We're going to step around a little bit just to ensure that I've got a COG executive board later this afternoon, but I want to make sure that I get a couple of things that I'd like to have in my head. But we'll start off with regular agenda items 1, 2, then we'll move to 7, then we'll move to the executive board, and then we'll come back for the rest. So first up on the regular agenda is to discuss and consider approval of the fiscal year 2025 TRIP program, annual report, and authorize a budget amount for fiscal year 2026. So this is an action item, and our presenter is Karina Maldonado, our planning manager.
Good morning, everyone. So as mentioned, there's 2 items on for action today is to review the annual report for TRIP, as well as review the allocation that would feed into the next item, which is to consider approval of fiscal year 26 transportation reinvestment annual call for projects. Staff is recommending approval of both action items, and we'll get into the details now. So just a quick reminder, I know you hear a lot about the TRIP program. This is our 5-year program that was established by the DCTA board back in November of 2020. As you recall, last year, the DCTA board did extend this program indefinitely back in January 2025. So it no longer has an expiration. It will continue annually, and annually we would discuss those allocations. The program remains unchanged. It's still a financial assistance program for our member cities to support transit supportive projects that are consistent and beneficial with our long-range service plan, and it aligns with our mission. So just briefly, you'll recognize this slide that was part of the July 2025 board budget presentation. And this is just reflecting our allocation process, which is no more than 15% set aside for the TRIP program. That is the maximum set aside for the program. However, it could be less than. So the numbers to pay attention to here is this balance, as the 15% is based on the net available after budgeting. So that 25 million number, and then the distribution of that is dependent on the percentage each member city contributes to that sales tax revenue.
I think it's important to remind people too that over time, this board chose to make sure that our planning dollars, that we were putting reserves aside, which were not being done in the budget prior to Paul's leadership, and being able to make sure that we've got those capital funds set aside for planning purposes is one of the reasons why you've seen that number tailed down a little bit over the years, is because we've got more actually budgeted as opposed to just letting that sit out there and then maybe pick up if a bus needs to be replaced on an emergency, have to figure out how to write that check. Instead, we've got those planning funds set aside. So I think that's important to remember, and I think it's more fiscally responsible that we do it that way.
Yeah, and to that point, we'll show you what those allocations look like and how that change has happened across the years. So as part of the annual report, we're providing a status update on the projects and the program to date, the spending, how much we've allocated. So you can see from fiscal year 21, which is the inception of the program, up to 2025, we've allocated or authorized $45 million towards this program. So this is just what's been made available to our member cities. As you'll see, the next point over is the total obligated funds within that period. And that is the projects that were actually awarded by the board that are presented to the board annually through the call for projects. And that amount is $35.57 million. To date, the executed for these fundings, which is the projects that have been completed or in progress and have submitted requests for reimbursement under this program, has totaled to $5.73 million. And you can see that breakdown by member city to show that overall we are 12.71% expended of that 45 million. So I think from the last couple presentations of this slide, it went from about 5% overall to 12%. So we are seeing some progress in some of these projects moving forward. With that, we'll go through the annual report. As you can see, City of Highland Village has the one project that was completed. This was a construction project, and we're aware that the funding is being pulled for future projects. City of Louisville has a total of 7 projects focused on design and construction. From here, we see that 2 of their projects are complete. 2 are in the final design completion and are pending reimbursements. So we anticipate to see those soon. And then 3 are either pending construction to start or under construction today. So we do see good progress on the City of Louisville side. And then going into the City of Denton, there's a total of 27 projects awarded through this program, through the life of the program. Of these, 9 are complete and are pending some final invoices. 9 are actively under construction. 1 is under the design, and then the remaining are either pending the final execution. Those are those fiscal year 25 projects. We're on the tail end of execution, or they're in their planning stage. And as I noted earlier, this is what our funding allocation has looked like through the life of the program. You can see that yellow line is the actual allocation every year, followed by what has been rolled over. So if we had a call for projects and there wasn't a full request of that funding, those funds carried over to the next year and became available in the next call for project. So you'll see a rollover line for every fiscal year, as well as the project obligations by member city. So what we see, if you see fiscal year 21, 7.6 million was allocated, going down, that number increased. But as we got to fiscal year 26, the funding allocation dropped to 5.9. However, the total funds available last fiscal year due to rollovers was actually 4.2 million. At the end of that call for projects, we saw a rollover by our two member cities. City of Denton expended all available funds. So we see rolling over into fiscal year 26 is about 9.4 million. And you can see that breakdown by member city at the bottom in red.
So just as from a board perspective, I asked my staff in Louisville, what are we banking for? What's going on? Because I as I put on my DCTA hat and I look at those funds, I'm like, okay, well then maybe they don't need it. And I don't want to ever create that implication. So if as board members, if we could maybe make sure that if our city is banking these dollars for a project, if they kind of get that information to staff, so to DCTA staff, so that we can have at least an awareness of what's going on there. In the case of Louisville, most of that is being staged for the TOD project. So there's several projects within that these dollars are anticipated to be used towards. I'm not sure where Highland Village might be on that.
Ask Paul.
And we are doing just that. We are banking that for some future improvements. We completed an FM 407 corridor study in 2023 to improve accessibility along FM 407. So we are working with a consulting engineer now to really get us best suited to apply for grants and to be able to take that money and really leverage it and make it go a little bit further. So that's where we are right now.
Awesome. So if we can maybe build that would be awesome. So we never get into. So if we can build that into an annual report, so we never get into a situation where this board is questioning whether there's value here or not.
Absolutely. And both cities of Highland Village and Louisville have been very clear to staff, to Paul, Austin, and myself about the banking of those funds. We can absolutely make sure that it's part of the annual report to be specific. Great. All right, so with that, I'll jump into kind of the first opportunity we've had since the new policy to take a look at the allocations moving forward into the next call for projects. So as mentioned earlier, during the budget process, we made available up to 15% in the budget, but there is an opportunity to request to evaluate potential adjustments to the trip allocations. So you see here a breakdown of a potential 5, 10, or the full 15%. You see that the allocation estimates are based on how that distribution to the sales tax revenue came in. So you see 49% for City of Denton, 5% for Highland Village, 46% towards Louisville. And as we kind of look at the distribution, we see about 1.2 could be available under a 5% approach. 2.5 million could be available under a 10% approach, and then the full 3.7 million under a 15% approach. So with that, I'll kind of pause for discussion and leave it to Paul if there's any other questions on this slide.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, this is part of the action item of this agenda item to identify what is the allocation that you all choose to provide for the call for projects. And the table up here is simply to provide some parameters if you chose something other than the 15%.
Just to clarify, so the policy as it states today is up to 15%.
Correct.
Is what we're looking at here, changing that to as an example, up to 10% and up to 5%? Or is this just,
No, we're not proposing changing the policy. We just provide these numbers in the event that you said, what would if we just allocated 10%, what would the impact be on the distribution?
okay,
So just for discussion purposes.
okay.
So, Mr. Here, so policy says up to 50%, but every year we make it, we as the board can decide what that percentage for that year could be.
Correct.
So, okay.
Okay.
Can I ask a question of staff, long-term? The long-term plan, are we still fiscally sound? If I go out 5 years or so?
Yes, sir. You have in front of you a long-range financial plan, the copy that was approved in the last budget cycle. And if you want to have further discussion about that, Jane Blarowitz is standing by to jump in for us. But what we have right now is a fiscally constrained plan out to 2037. And our goal for this year and this next budget cycle is to bring that to a 20-year plan. What we were saying when we went through the budget process last year was that towards the tail end of this long-range financial plan picture, fund balances start to go negative. And so that causes us to set goals for this year to figure out how to improve those long-range financial plan outcomes. If you look at the TRIP line item that can be found on page 2 of 3, line 39. So page 2 of 3, line 39, you see transportation reinvestment program. And for fiscal 26, you see the $3.7 million that's in front of you right now for consideration. But after that, the TRIP program is zeroed out because we are taking it on an annual year-by-year basis. And these allowances that we're setting aside for projects could change as we learn more about cost estimates on the A train, for example, or cost changes on buses or whatever it might be. And that is kind of the structure that we set up in the last budget conversation.
Okay. Let me ask another question. Are we assuming, are we building what you're showing me really is sinking funds? You're setting up a bunch of sinking funds for
That's
all
correct.
the improvements. So have we captured, the $150 million for the conversion of the A train to 15-minute headways, the however many millions of dollars to go to downtown Carrollton?
Yep.
Is that all captured?
So if you look at, I'm still on page 2, if you look at line 31, the downtown Carrollton A train extension, you see the sum of that line is 76.6 million. And then line 32, the A train 15-minute frequency program allowance is set aside for 150.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the money based on the current rough order of magnitude estimates that we have in hand. When Austin briefs on the A train, he'll talk about there's some parts of the A train downtown Carrollton extension we don't know about yet, like if we have to convert PTC or have to build additional track for DGNO. So these numbers are fungible to some extent, but they're the best information we had when we made the long range financial plan. And we feel like they're good for purposes of this kind of planning conversation. They're good for reliability.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You also see, since we're on the topic of set asides, the fleet purchase lines 25 through 28 for cutaway buses, regular buses, the major maintenance on the rail system, rail fleet purchase on line 34. So this is the work that we did through through this year's budget process. Jane, I don't want to steal your thunder if there's anything else you want to add. Okay.
Questions or comments? All right, if there's no further questions or comments on this, oh, sorry, I missed that.
It took a second to react. I'm comfortable with the 15%. I'll just say that. I know that Denton's really actively using it as y'all have seen, and I'm sure Highland Village could continue saving up for their project. So I'm in support of the 15%.
I think what's important on this too is this allows us each year to say, okay, if I'm running short on another capital project, I consider this capital projects. what would 1.2 million give us? Right? If we dropped it to 10% for a year, but we're having that conversation in this room as opposed to just letting it run on autopilot. So, and I get that creates some uncertainty for our cities, but at the end of the day, I'm tasked in this room to figure out what's going to move the most people and create the most value for all of our partners. So that I think having this as a conversation item every year is important, just like any of our enhanced policy programs or any of those things where we look to spend money. All right, with that, I think we have an action to be taken on this one.
So would you like to just advance to the end?
Yeah.
Go ahead and provide the rest of the slides.
Oh, sure.
To just show how that would impact the second item, which is the actual call for projects. So keeping those 5, 10, 15% funding lines there just to show you how it amounts to. As we add the allocation to the rollover amount, the fiscal year 26 available funding would increase to be overall, look at the total number between 10.7 million and 13.2 million. As you break it down by member city, you'll see what the available funds plus either a 5 to 10 or 15 that City of Denton would go between 600,000 to 1.8. City of Highland Village would go to 1.8 to 1.9, or roughly 2. And then City of Louisville's available funding would go at a minimum of 8.2 to roughly 9.4 million available. So it's just to help kind of paint the picture as you decide whether to go full allocation or a reduced amount. This is what those totals would be.
Awesome. Love it.
And a slight disclaimer, this does include projects that have completed and have returned funds. And some of those kind of little nitpicky things that kind of hide in the background.
Okay.
And of course, the annual call for projects that you're familiar with, we're here at step 2, which is to decide the allocation and total available funding. After the approval item, we will release the call for projects to our member cities with an application, which would give them a 90-day period to get their applications prepared and submitted, followed by DCTA staff's 30-day review, and then forward to the board for review and consideration. Here's the timeline for the call for projects. One thing I'll note that is different from before, it is not a requirement of the policy, but to increase coordination with our member cities, we're offering an optional pre-submittal meeting with DCTA staff to ensure that proposed projects are in alignment with our long-range service plan and with current service provided today in each member city. Following that process, applications would be due based on the 90-day period around the end of April, followed by eligibility review in the month of May, and then potential board meeting obligation of projects in the summer to fall of 2026, and execution of those reimbursement agreements to follow in the winter. So with that, we'll take it to the action items. For regular agenda item 1, which is to recommend approval of the fiscal year 25 annual report, as well as authorize a budgeted amount for the fiscal year 26 trip program, followed by regular action item number 2, where staff recommends approval of the fiscal year 26 trip call for projects. And with that, I'll leave it to the board.
I think we're there. All right. There's no further comments or questions. I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to offer a motion that we approve regular agenda item 1, authorizing the program with and leaving it at the 15% for 2026.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We've got a motion for RAO2.
I'll go ahead and offer a motion to approve fiscal 2026 annual call for projects.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and move to item 7 on the agenda. Item 7 is to discuss an update on the A-Train Enhancement Program and consider authorizing matching funds in the amount of $6.25 million for federal discretionary grant application for construction of the downtown Carrollton extension and platform. This is an action item, and Austin Frith, our VP of Planning and Development, will be presenting.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good morning, members of the board. I'm here to provide you all an update on our program enhancements and how those are tracking along, as well as consider authorizing matching funds for a build grant that will be presented to you all. So as we take a step back, overarching vision here, this program is about making the A train work better for riders in the region, broken down into schedule and frequency improvements to increase the speed on existing alignment. This is the work we're doing on our curve and speed enhancements project. 15-minute headways to continue to advance connectivity and alignment with regional commuter rail, and then extending service hours to match Silver Line to get to DFW Airport. Along those same lines, extending the service down to downtown Carrollton, again, capturing that regional growth and ridership that we want to achieve. And then the Corinth Station, looking at that long term, what does that mean for the county? What does that mean for the region for connectivity to local communities? Quick timeline update. This is this really overarching program, curve and speed enhancements. This is again our project to increase speed along the existing alignment. That's scheduled to end construction towards the middle of the summer, middle to late summer. Right below that is our service hour expansion and PTC analysis that is ongoing. We have a task order awarded to our Lochner team to look at that, and we'll be providing some updates here in the coming months on how that assessment is going. Downtown Carrollton, we're in the thick of that. I'll be providing you all an update here shortly on where we're at with that project. And then 15-minute headway, similar to downtown Carrollton, we have a task order awarded to Lochner for that. And we'll be providing an update on that schematic design here in the coming months. This slide just shows just how project definition matures over time. I think we've shared this with the board before, but it's just a reminder of how we're advancing the design to get to a better certainty of the estimate. That allows us to apply for federal and local grants just in time to advance the program along. The higher certainty of estimate we have, the better position we are to apply for these grants. So where are we at with task order 2? So preliminary engineering is well underway. We've got survey work outside of the right of way is approximately 80% complete. We're coordinating closely with DART on obtaining the right of entry for the right of way access to include the survey within that corridor. And then we'll continue working on this with DART and DGNO as we progress this task filtering design effort. Quick update on how we're progressing the design and things that are coming up as we progress this. So we are looking into this idea that what would it take beyond the existing alignment enhancements, what would it take to maybe offer a different solution with the track alignment? So currently we're operating on the same corridor. We would be operating on the same corridor as the DGNO. So that far right track would be a shared track usage. We are looking at what would it take in the event that we wanted to maybe separate that operation. So maybe A train operates on the corridor in the red, and then we would allow DGNO to continue their operation on the corridor that's existing. The orange area there is where potentially the platform would go. I'll caveat this with this is just a preliminary planning exercise of what's possible at this point. We're early enough in design to explore these opportunities where it makes sense for both rail operations. And what this would allow is us to look at maybe deferring the PTC enhancements that we would have to be required in order to run on that same track. So this is just a part of the analysis and assessments that we're doing currently with the team. What does that look like?
Austin, real quick.
Yes.
I know you're going to cover this, but when you talk about PTC enhancements, what we're saying is we wouldn't have to convert to IATMS in this scenario because we'd be operating on a completely different track than the DGNO. So it also saves us the additional infrastructure for freight operations concurrent with passenger operations. when LAN was doing their feasibility analysis, they didn't look this far to the west because of the DMN water main that's underneath that platform, but we feel like it's got enough merit to take a look at it. Alton's going to talk more about that.
Yeah, so to piggyback on that, as you can see in the picture on the right, along this corridor, there are some constraints. We've got power lines, like Paul said, there's a water main. There's train signal infrastructure that's in that corridor. So that's part of the analysis that the team is doing to understand what that cost is to maybe relocate or get over some of those constraints. This is just an aerial view of what that would look like where we move the station platform to the west. Currently, the design is the platform is, I believe, in this area. So it's on the existing corridor. We would move everything to the west to get out of that DGNO operational area. And then the connection, pedestrian connection, what that would look like to the Green Line and Silver Line areas. So as we look at this alternative, these are just some ideas that we're identifying as what the current plan is, what is the alternative comparison to that. I think the biggest things that we're seeing, as we talked about, are the areas in the green boxes where that PTC conversion or potentially dual equipping DGNO with our system would be required or would not be required for this alternative alignment. And then another opportunity for greater flexibility. So whenever we talk about future operations, the coordination that we would have to have with DGNO on dispatch and just scheduling, doing this alternative alignment would allow us to have greater flexibility in that manner. This slide is intended to show how downtown Carrollton extension cost estimate has evolved over time. The original $76.6 million RUM estimate was provided back in 2019. That's what's on the existing long range service plan. So just to level set, this was using high level assumptions around alignment, station configuration, right of way utilities, and construction methods. As the project has advanced, additional scope elements have begun to emerge, including downtown constraints, freight corridor requirements, regulatory considerations, and escalation in labor and material costs, all of which introduce greater uncertainty into the midpoint estimates as they're shown here. The ongoing preliminary engineering work represented to the right side will specifically focus on narrowing that uncertainty that we're seeing by validating some of these assumptions that we have with real data and refining any quantities we would have on the construction side. So that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is making sure that whatever estimate we provide has as much of this assumptions verified. That way we can come to you all with a much better ROM estimate. When we talk about funding opportunities, what you'll see here is a matrix that we've put together for alignment with the long range service plan and potential grant opportunities moving into the future. So part of this board action is to consider approval of that $6.25 million match for the build grant. So the build grant is a federal discretionary program administered by USDOT that funds nationally and regionally significant transportation projects. It's highly competitive, places strong emphasis on project readiness, safety, and economic competitiveness and regional connectivity. So we feel this build grant really aligns with the downtown Carrollton Extension project. That's why we want to move this forward. It allows a higher federal share than many other programs, which is why we're requesting a 20% local match. Authorizing the match positions DCTA to compete for that $25 million grant funding. So one caveat here on that, where we see the NCT COG elements, these are potential funding sources through RTC, CMAQ, and other grants. This is stuff that we've put into the program that we perceive we'll pursue it into the future, but it's clearly not fully programmed yet into some of these programs. So there is a caveat there. And then we also, when we look at the cost range of what we're seeing. The 125 you see on the bottom is what's programmed into the Mobility 2050 COG plan. The 76.6 is what we have in alarm service. So there is a range that we're dealing with here. So we start at 76. I think at this point, it's probably going to lie within that 76 to 125 number where we actually end on the overall cost estimate. So this action is really just to provide that local match for that $25 million bill grant. As far as an update on coordination we have with our partners. So coordination with DART is focused on two critical areas: right of entry for the corridor survey for that task order for preliminary engineering, and then real estate alignment on appraisal scope. So this is part of the discussions we'll have with the ILA moving forward. On the DGNO side, we have followed up on the request for their operational requirements. And then we've provided them some assumptions based on some previous knowledge we have and we've received to date. So we'll continue that close coordination with them. Discussions with the city of Carrollton are centered around quiet zones, potential closures, and then looking at this idea of this alternative design. We'll be engaging them at the appropriate time. The town of Hickory Creek, this is the curb and speed improvement project. So there's an opportunity where we can align schedules for that project and the roadway project there in Hickory Creek. So we're looking at areas that we can align schedules to have some synergies in those two projects. And then finally, on the city of Corinth, there's an upcoming update we'll be providing to them on capital and O&M costs for this station based on the fact that we don't have an alternative siting analysis performed just yet. This slide illustrates why timing is critical for some of these funding opportunities. So we've got two areas of accelerated versus baseline timelines. On the accelerated timeline, this is us really submitting for that build grant in February deadline, it going to RTC action for TIP modification in October. That would follow a federal approval of the TIP, and then the project funding would become available in the STIP sometime in February of next year. We are pushing and our coordination with COG to get the accelerated timeline implemented, but we do have a backup plan if that's not achievable, and that's our baseline timeline, which essentially has that same first 4 or 5 steps happening, but we would defer that RTC action would be the next action in March of 27, which would push the STIP funding to June of next year. And then as far as upcoming discussions and updates to the board, we have upcoming cost estimate that's going to be due from our consultant here in the next couple of weeks. So we'll brief updates on that in February. Crossings quiet zone assessment for downtown Carrollton extension. We'll be providing you all an update of how that's coming along in March. The PTC assessment, as we discussed, with what's looking like a recommendation, that'll be coming in April, and that's really to understand, do we dual equip DGNO, or do we transition over to the regional PTC element? And then finally, looking at delivery method, I know we had a previous discussion about that early last year. This is to kind of, with the design moving along, some questions that we're getting answered as of this point. We'll have some more updates on where that's leaning towards as far as what type of method we would like to deliver this program in. And with that, staff recommends the board authorize matching funds in the amount of $6.25 million for federal discretionary grant application for construction of the downtown Carrollton extension and platform. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? A few. You have a few? So let's talk about this in context of what's happening with our partner to the south. So should Carrollton have an election and pull out of DART, what are we looking at as far as impacts or this timeline, if we accelerate this, I'm worried, how far do we go down the rabbit hole? How much money have we spent that we can't recover?
Well, I've got a response to that, but in terms of the dollar amount of task orders we have out right now with Lochner doing several different things all at once. Do you have that off the top of your head?
It's probably close to 5 million.
Okay. Plus, we got the curb and speed improvements that regardless of what happens on the DART system, the train can still benefit from going a little bit faster. Obviously, if the A train is not able to connect to the Green Line at downtown Carrollton, its utility as a mode in Denton County and the region is significantly impacted. One of the biggest outcomes from the work that we're doing right now, though, is to complete the preliminary planning that's necessary to understand what does it take to get to downtown Carrollton. That is the PTC decision, and that is the station siting location. I think if we have a belief that in 2050, we're going to have a rail system operating in DFW, I think it's still important to answer those questions right now while we have the work underway. The other thing that we're trying to accomplish is a better cost estimate. With the scope better understood, what's a better cost estimate that we could have, even if it is to put it on the shelf for some period of time until all this other stuff in the region is worked out. And I think I would recommend that we continue that as well. This timeline of work is set to end these current task orders, and if I'm not mistaken, by September, October timeframe. So probably about the time that the picture is clear as to what is the state of transit in the region, this work will be done. It seems like a really good natural stopping point or pausing point, because I think that the question, what does it take to get to downtown Carrollton and how much does it cost, is going to come up again. And having done this work, we'll have a really good answer on that.
Just to clarify though, the 6.25, that would be something that would just be an allocation that would be spent for construction. This is just us saying that we authorize this amount to be used as a matching portion to this federal grant in order for us to submit the application. Doesn't mean we're actually spending that 6.25.
That is correct. So the shortest answer to that is that 6.25 is coming out of the long range financial plan. If you look at, if you have that back in front of you, I can show you line item 31, the downtown Carrollton A train extension is at 76.6 million. And then down below, we have capital grants discretionary on line 46, downtown Carrollton extension, $65.1 million. So what we're saying in this plan is of the 76.6 million, we're assuming that we're going to find funding elsewhere, either at the region or federally, for 65 million, leaving about $11 million local liability. What this chart is saying is with this build grant opportunity, that's an 80-20 match. If you authorize 6.25, and then we're able to get COG money for the rest of that 45.35, the total outlay would be $13 million of local funding. And so there's a slight update to make on this long range financial plan based on that $2 million difference between 11 and 13 million. But you're absolutely right that unless the grant is awarded, the funding doesn't get spent. And we're really leveraging dollars. If assuming the project was going to go forward, we're leveraging money that we were going to spend anyway to get the $25 million of federal money and reduce the burden on the regional ask. Now, is the grant application the right thing to do at this time? I think that's a really good question. We've been operating under the MO since the beginning of starting the A-Train Enhancement Program of trying to get to downtown Carrollton as soon as possible. And so I appreciate the board and your flexibility in letting us proceed with the things that we know and then giving us the time to figure out the things that we don't know as they come up. But there is a question to be asked that if we apply for a grant and then the grant is awarded, and then it is decided that for whatever reason, the Green Line doesn't connect to Carrollton anymore, then we're going to have a grant that we can't obligate. And that is a policy decision and discussion for you all to have amongst yourselves. And I will say from my perspective, because we've not discussed this alternative as a staff, but from my perspective, we are already leaning way forward with things that we think we know to get this grant application in. So if there's a level of discomfort about what might happen if the grant is awarded, then I think that should really be considered.
So if the grant is awarded and then Carrollton has an election to pull out and it happens. So then we essentially give the grant back.
Well,
Does that hurt us in the future when applying for future grants?
it can, but I can say also from our experience with other grants that this agency has won and that I inherited, the US DOT and the powers that be have been very flexible with us about figuring out how to get those grant funds applied. So it's not an on-off switch. There is a lot of conversation that can happen. So
Question.
I will also say, in my mind, the biggest value of submitting this grant application is not necessarily because I think our likelihood of award is 90% or better, but it's really to get the conversation started at the federal level about what we're trying to do and to get feedback on the application and how to make it more competitive for whatever that's worth.
Thought at some point we talked that there is a possibility that we could interline with the green line track. If worse comes to worse, there's a way we can potentially run and all get down to a station in Dallas to hook up with Green Line.
That is a bold vision that has not been tested technically or studied to any extent.
Okay.
And so I would not eliminate it as an alternative, but there's a lot of work that would need to be done to sort that out.
Good question.
Yeah, it has crossed our mind.
I guess my question really is, I know that there are 5 cities that have put things in motion with respect to leaving DART. Carrollton is one of those that is not among those 5. They're, I guess, in the early discussion stages about whether or not they want to go down that road. How likely do we think it is that they will? And then under that, what's the timeline? I mean, from the time that they decide to whether or not to have an up or down vote to call that election, how long will it take them to do it and get the wheels turning so that where we will know which direction they're moving?
My expectation on that would be that they would not want to have that election as part of their May elections, that it would be in November. So take that for what it is.
Do you have any insight into, is this going to be on a near future agenda item for their city council? Is there, are they going to wait till after the May elections to put it on the agenda? I mean, what are we looking at?
From what I've heard and had conversations with the mayors and whatnot, my understanding is that if Carrollton decides to float an election, it wouldn't be until November. That they, there's putting it up on the local at the same ballot turns it into could potentially turn that into a political for their current elections. The other pieces is they're looking at what other cities do. So if Plano pulls out, if Irving pulls out, then the question then would be, does Carrollton want to be left holding whatever financial bag that creates? So that's another reason why they're, I think, being a little more temperate.
Would it be reasonable to expect then if these first 5, if they all 3 or 4 of the 5 all decide to pull out, then you'll start to see a domino effect at that point?
I would agree.
One other thing that comes to mind with regard to the grant application, the deadline to submit is towards the end of February. It's going to take months for the feds to review. If at any point, if you all approve the submittal and at any point you said, you know what, let's pull it, it's an easy call to the feds to say we would like to rescind our application. Right. So I think we have that flexibility as well.
Well, as far as the cost to prepare the application, that's funds that have already been approved. We're just approving the matching funds.
That's correct. That's correct. And again, the matching funds are already in the long range financial plan. It's not new money.
Earmark. Talk to me about this 7660 versus 125. And then how do we span the 48? How do we come to the 2 different numbers there, the 76 versus the 125?
I'll take that. So the 76.6 million comes from the LAN estimate that was done a few years ago. However, and the 125 is out of the Mobility 2050 plan.
Okay.
The things that we don't know about that Austin talked about in this briefing is what is the impact of a PTC conversion if a PTC conversion is required? That's number one. We don't know what that dollar amount is going to be. And then what is the cost of additional track infrastructure required for DGNO to operate concurrently with DCTA? And that's the study that we're doing right now, concurrent with the design work.
Okay.
So our expectation is that 48.4, some of that is going to get sucked up by those additional cost items, depending on how they come in.
Okay.
But that 125 from the 2050 plan is the unconstrained regional plan.
Yep.
That has to be programmed into real projects like Austin talked about. And we did make a submittal, a project request form to the COG staff to get that tip process started. Again, with all the caveats of the uncertainties that we have, because we're trying to maintain momentum on the program.
And what are our thoughts on how we bridge that worst case scenario is how I'm reading that 48.4?
It would be a reallocation of funds in the long range. If the regional funding does not come through, then the options are to reallocate things in the long range financial plan.
Do we have enough unencumbered funding to make that work?
Not in this version of the long range financial plan.
Okay. That's what I have. Well, I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Correct. That's right. And there's so many variables in
Yeah.
front of us. We learn more every day. Every time an engineer sits down at the desk to do some drawing, we learn more about what's the cost of the project, what's the scope, all that sort of stuff. There's just a lot of variables, but we feel like we're painting the edges for you so we can keep moving forward.
Super. Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Recommend that we approve the item as stated.
All right, I've got a motion and I have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, staff. Appreciate the deep dive. All right. Like to go ahead and take the next item out of order, which is to convene executive session. The board of directors will convene in close executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Subchapter D, Section 551.071. 2, consultation with attorney to discuss and receive legal advice on the following items: University of North Texas Interlocal Cooperation Agreement, Dallas Area Rapid Transit Transportation Access Agreement and Easement, and City of Frisco Interlocal Cooperation Agreement. We are now going to be in closed session. We're back in a regular session. Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene in a regular session. It's 11:59. We're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute bio break and lunch, and we'll be back. It is 12:15. We're going to reconvene back into open session. Next up on the agenda are items 3 through 6. We're going to deal with these all together. Number 3 is discuss and consider approval of a resolution approving the budget revision 2026-02 in the amount of $225,000 to be allocated for the purchase of 2 cutaway buses. 4, discuss update of the DCTA fleet plan and consider authorizing the chief executive officer to negotiate and execute necessary documents for the purchase of 2 cutaway buses not to exceed $450,000. 5, discuss and consider authorizing the chief executive officer to negotiate and execute necessary documents to refurbish 1 Gillig bus in the amount not to exceed $500,000. And 6, discuss purchase of 3 2020 Gillig buses from Dallas Area Rapid Transit. And we have Lisa Taylor here to give us our VP of Operations to give us the lowdown.
Good morning, afternoon now. First, I want to give you just an update on our fleet revenue plans. We have 6 buses that are already ordered. We are in pre-production. We have pre-production meetings. We've had pre-production meetings, and we will be excited to receive those later this year. We have 1 refurbished bus that we're going to talk about today, and also 3 potential buses that we could get from DART. On the refurbished bus, so board, we're asking for approval for this one. This is a ELP item that will extend the life of the bus by 10 years, according to the FTA circular. And this bus is 60% of the cost of a brand new bus. When we get the bus back, it will be built from the bottom up, and all our current technology will be on this bus, and we will wrap it to look like a DCTA bus. And we have a $15,000 contingency budget. This is covered by 85% of it is covered by grant funding. We are in the process of refreshing and updating our current buses before they get to refurbishment or replacement. As you see here, we have what the old seat looked like and what a reupholstery seat looks like. On the DART bus, they are 2020 Gillig buses. There are 3 of them, and DART is looking to dispose of them at this time. They're asking $300,000 for them. And to make this bus ready for DCTA, we'll have to add the technology package that we currently have on our buses and wrap the buses. So in addition to the $300K, we'll have to have $105 to bring the technology and $10,000 to wrap the bus. We are currently in talks with DART. We actually have a meeting with them tomorrow at 1 p.m. to continue to discuss this item. Just a little update on some things that we're doing to be more efficient. Early in the fall, we started looking at all of our demand trips on access. And what we found out is that we could be more efficient by providing the same amount of service hours, but we could eliminate 2 routes and still maintain our on-time performance of 99%. So what we did was we pulled 2 routes out of service and we maintained the 99%. What we had is we had vehicles that were out that were not as productive, so now they are more productive. With the peak time of the day is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, where we pick up the most number of passengers per hour.
So to be clear, we didn't eliminate the routes, we just eliminated some time on the ends of the routes. Is that right?
So what we did is we pulled the routes out of service. We had 9 routes, now we have 7 routes.
Okay.
But we're still picking up the same number of passengers, and we're still maintaining the on-time performance on those routes. What we found out, we had maybe 2 buses out in the mornings at 4 and 5 o'clock, where we were only picking up maybe 1 passenger one day, 2 passengers another day. So if we just have 1 bus out there, we were able to eliminate that. And then we had trips out there. We had routes that were scheduled to 8 p.m. at night. However, we were not picking up anyone, so we were able to move those times back into 6. If we get a request, we can always extend a route out to be able to.
Thank you.
So we are actually to purchase cutaways, and want to show you the 2 buses that are out of service. Those that are highlighted in black are currently out of service at this time. And if we're able to purchase 2 additional cutaways, we'll be able to remove 4 of them out of service. So we're asking, we have an ELP to purchase 1 cutaway bus at $225,000. And we'll have that budgeted into the capital program. We're asking to purchase 2 at this time, because that would allow us to remove 4 vehicles with the purchase of 2 vehicles. And they have a larger tank on, which was how we're able to do that. We won't have to switch buses out in the middle of the day. And it's also a cost avoidance. We go back. All of these vehicles are past their extended life. So if we keep them in service, we're gonna have to start replacing things, engines, transmissions. And as you see, there's a cost to that. So we are able to save about $33,000 by retiring them earlier. And that's the reason why we want to purchase these 2 additional, 1 additional instead of the 1 that's budgeted. So the recommendation are here for 3 to do a budget resolution for $225,000 to purchase 2 cutaways, or to give the CEO authorization to purchase the 2, and to be able to refurbish 1 ghillie not to exceed $500,000.
So why did we move away from item 6? There's no action on that one?
Not yet. Negotiations continue with DART. Lisa and her team are working through that, and if we can come to a successful resolution negotiation, we'll bring it back to you for consideration.
What's the life left on those?
They're 2020s, so they have 7 years left on them, and they have about 200,000 miles on them.
Is that good?
Can I ask, I was gonna have to follow up to that.
The service they were vehicles that were running on the UTD shuttle, and DART has pulled the UTD shuttle back in-house, so a contractor was running those.
Okay. Awesome. Well, then we'll hear more about it.
Can I follow up on
Yes,
that? Since we're replacing 2018 buses, so I'm just curious. If we're in the process of replacing the 18s,
right,
and we're negotiating 2020s,
right,
are we just buying 2 more years? That's our question.
The 2018s are cutaway buses, the little.
Okay.
Actually, it's not a big.
These are full size. Okay, they have.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It's a 40-foot bus.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the ones we're actually gonna make a decision on? There's no other questions. I'll take some motions for RAO 3, RAO 4, and RAO 5.
Ready? I can make a motion that we approve RAO 03, staff, the approval of the revision to for an amount of 225 as allocated to be allocated for the purchase of 2 cutaway buses.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Moving on. I have a motion for RAO 4.
I'll make a motion. We approve item number 4, authorizing the CEO to negotiate, execute on 2 cutaway buses not to exceed 450.
So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, that's all approved.
I guess on RAO
5, yep.
You're gonna go back.
I'll go ahead and make a recommendation to authorize the CEO to negotiate and execute necessary documents to refurbish one Gillis bus in an amount not to exceed $500,000.
Have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, board. With that, I'm gonna step out and leave the rest of this to Mr. Jaworski.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So we'll move on to item number 8, discuss update on intermediate service plan phase 3. This is a discussion item.
Good afternoon again, members of the board. We're going to provide you all with an update on our ISP Phase 3. This is a discussion item, so no board action is required here. Just to give a high-level review of what we've done since we launched the ISP. Phase 1, we improved frequency on 3, 6, and 7 on the Connect service. Good news out of that, we saw about a 60% growth year over year in ridership. From that, we took lessons learned. We integrated a little bit of adjustments in phase 2 to integrate the A train into our service map for an option for mode. And then we also adjusted geofences around the universities to capture more. So as we move to phase 3, the question that we're asking is, where should fixed route grow and expand? And then where can we flex microtransit to meet demand? So our overall objective here for phase 3 is considering expanded high frequency holistic year-round bus network, increasing ridership, optimizing modes while keeping an eye on overall cost. So because of some of the key drivers here, we're going to be looking at is cost per passenger on each mode. Look at the current UNT contract service areas, and then looking at areas to increase ridership growth within Denton, and then overall looking at KPIs for all member cities. So as simple as I could graphically show it, I know we mentioned these core levers of what we have within our service. So if you think about it, pulling a lever on expanded fixed route, whether we reduce or increase that, we're looking at costs, we're looking at consistency from the overall network, connectivity from both the local and regional perspective, and then customer service is always being looked at. When we look at Go Zone, we're looking at pulling the lever of service hours, increasing or decreasing those. It's got an impact on cost. And then our KPIs of wait time and seat unavailability are also impacted. So we're really balancing what levers we pull and how much to make sure that we're keeping an eye on all these gauges that we show in front of you. So with that, I'm going to invite Karina Maldonado, our planning manager, to go through ISP scenarios and cost data information.
Good afternoon now, right? Yep, all right. It's been a while. So starting off, I'm going to kind of give a very quick overview of the scenarios you've already seen in the past presentations, just to realign us as we go into the cost per passenger. So obviously what we operate today, color coded for greater viewing, is the Connect network, Connect 3, 6, and 7, which is shown in green, the UNT contracted services shown in blue, and then the North Texas Express, which is a commuter route between Denton and Fort Worth. Under scenario 1, this scenario takes a look at expanding the Connect network by adding the top 6 UNT. In past presentations, we showed you that Go Zone capture for every scenario. This is just kind of bringing it forth back to you, which is a 31% capture of those trips between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. within this proposed scenario. Scenario 2 focuses more on an expansion outside of UNT, so that's Connect 3, 6, and 7, and then bringing back those former routes in a new, more efficient way, which is Connect 2 there in red, and then Connect 4 shown in purple. That has a Go Zone capture of 29% between the hours of 7 and 9. Scenario 3 is that all-in scenario that brings both scenarios 1 and 2 together. As you can see, this option provides the greatest geography coverage and service and has the GO zone capture of 56%. So it's kind of that all-in option. If we could do it all, here's what it would look like. And then the next two scenarios are similar, slightly adjusted, but scenario 4 takes a look at expanding the Connect network with 2 and 4 added, but also taking a look at kind of a compromise option of bringing in the Colorado Express commuter route into the network, connecting to Route 7 in a modified way than it operates today. This particular routing wasn't shown in previous presentations. After some analysis and looking at ridership areas and where we're serving today, this routing provides kind of similar consolidation of those off-campus routes that are provided to UNT. And this has, similar to scenario 3, just slightly under, is a 54% capture between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then finally, scenario 5 builds off of 4 and adds in a modified Discovery Park, again, reducing the duplication of service with the existing Connect network and providing that greater capture on the west end. And that would, similar to scenario 4, would still maintain about a 54% capture between 7 and 9 p.m. of GO zone trips. So when we compare all the scenarios together, some key things to note. Let me pull up a note before I stumble here. All of these scenarios are driven by the need to offset the GO zone capacity. When we look at modal preference and modal efficiency, we're talking about the fiscal year 25 GO zone trips, how we can capture them on fixed route, and all of these scenarios kind of guide or lead us towards that mode shift. In these scenarios, though, there is an assumption that even with the top 6 UNT, that we are providing a year-round service. As we operate today, those routes are seasonal, so these assumptions take that in. But what that means is that there has to be some adjustments to the services that we provide and service to UNT through adjustments to that agreement. So now as we go into the cost curves, in the past, DCTA has provided, along with ISP scenario, also ISP phase 1, was a look between the modal differences of bus and GO zone, and to identify where it's more cost favorable in terms of cost per passenger. So when we look at this analysis for each of these scenarios, these are some of the assumptions that go into this. We are looking at a year-round service, so you can see the span of service, which includes weekdays, Saturday, Sunday, which is aligned with the UNT service, and then no service on holidays. The costs that we're looking at are based on our fiscal year 25 cost of service analysis. So we have an all-in cost for existing services of Connect, it's routes 3, 6, 7, and which operates on 6 buses. When we look at adding services to the core network, whether it's what is currently operated under contracted service for UNT or added routes 2 and 4, because these are added to the network, we're looking at a marginal cost of service. How do additional buses impact the network, impact the cost? And you'll see by scenario what those added vehicle totals look like. For GO zone, we're looking at the marginal cost of GO zone and a productivity at 4.2. Now, again, these are fiscal year 24. We will rerun this analysis with updated numbers once they're available. And then as we do the comparison, one of the key points to understand what that cost per passenger is ridership. How many passengers per hour do we anticipate in the morning period, the PM period, the midday period, and late night? So using actual APC counts, those are automatic passenger counts from existing data today, we have made some assumptions on what we could see for each of these scenarios, as well as using the fiscal year 25 GO zone data. So just kind of taking a look behind the curtain, this is how we gathered some of the data that you'll see in these cost curves. We've taken a look at every time of day period, so AM period being 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., midday period from 9 to 3:30, and these are kind of transit industry standards. the PM peak period of 3:30 to 7 PM, and then after 7 PM, 7 to 9 in this case, because that's what our service window would be. Top left, you see what DCTA uses as a data tool that we've created to analyze existing GO zone trips, put in a geo-fenced area to say, all the trips in this buffer, please populate them for me. So that the GO zone data that we presented previously about capture is coming from this tool, and you are able to filter it by time of day. So we're getting actual time of day numbers for GO zone capture. For the APC data, we have a program called Hop Through. So as people are boarding the vehicles, it's tallied automatically into the system. So we are using fiscal year 25 actual data on Connect and UNT service to make a minimum assumption of what we would see time of day. So if anyone has questions on any of this, please feel free to stop me. So what that brings us to is this cost curve. So you're gonna see a lot of lines. I'll go through and break it down. Orange line is the GO zone cost to provide service. You can see based on capacity within a GO zone vehicle, it can only carry a certain number of passengers. So after a while, you'll see that line kind of evens out, right? Even if we add vehicles to the service, we're still only able to capture 4 per vehicle. And it's got a fixed cost. For bus, as the ridership increases, the cost per passenger decreases as the buses have a larger capacity and can carry more people throughout the time. So what we generally see with microtransit is with low density areas, microtransit seems to be the more appropriate mode. And when you see a higher passenger per hour, bus is more favorable. So generally what you're seeing is when those lines intersect, the cost per passenger becomes indifferent, meaning you could operate bus, you could operate fixed GO zone, but past to the right, it really does become bus favorable. So this is just an example of scenario 1. The solid blue line is the existing Connect network. White points are the existing network today. As we look at the dashed blue line, that's how many buses are added. In this scenario, that's 14 buses added to the system. Each of the blue points are the passengers per hour that we anticipate based on our data. And these are minimums. These are not to say this is the exact number. These are estimates based on the data that we have in hand. It does not consider land uses, new developments that could increase that number. So scenario 1, we see AM peak. We estimate about 267 passengers per hour. And we see that there's a significant difference between GO zone and bus in cost per passenger. And as you can see, everything's right to the green dot, which is your cost indifferent point. So we could see in this scenario, we are bus favorable at all times of the day. I won't do this for every scenario. I just generally want to show you how it works visually, and then we'll go on and give you a quick summary. So for scenario 2, we're seeing that we're adding 6 buses to the network. We see late night and AM peak left of the indifferent point. That's not necessarily bad. It could lean towards GO zone, but again, it doesn't account for additional development that might be happening in the area along these routes. Midday PM, we're right of that cost indifferent, so we're bus favorable.
Good, Karina, really quick, if you go back just one. We saw the same thing when we did this in the first phase with the Connect system. Some periods of the day were GO zone favorable, some periods of the day were bus favorable. And what we said at the time, and we'll say here again, is in order to run a network from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., the bus has to be available. You can't start the bus at midday and expect the people that got out on one mode to come back on another mode. And so when you made the bet on ISP phase 1, you won the bet because ridership on the network increased overall. That's why we're having this conversation. And so scenario 2, you're kind of seeing the same thing show up. And I would also note on that University Drive, the west to east new Route 4, high concentration of commercial, lots of GO zone mobility. We feel strongly that's a good opportunity to capture fixed route ridership.
Yeah, and if we remember the presentation where we initially started looking at concepts for these routes 2 and 4, we saw a lot of increased development along both of those routes, a lot of multifamily, which is a high transit generating use. So that's why I want to point out, we don't want to stick to the, 98 passengers per hour for AM peak. That's the minimum kind of range to start off with. But we likely will see higher than that. Moving quickly to scenario 3, again, we see a lot of the times of day points to the right of the go zone, the indifferent cost point, which is bus favorable. And then similar with scenario 4, adding 9 buses, it's the same story. So what does that mean? When we take a comparison of all the scenarios and cost per passenger, looking at time of day, we generally see that the cost per passenger favors bus in nearly all scenarios. You'll see a couple of points where late night service, we anticipate low ridership. So it might be an opportunity for Go Zone to take over in the late night period. We won't really be able to tell until we move forward, but those are things to consider. Overall, the factors that are impacting this cost per passenger analysis is how many buses are we adding to the network to provide this service under these scenarios? What does the pattern look like for the route? Often if the route is longer, we might need more buses to keep at a 20-minute frequency. So these are different kind of factors that might shift the cost per passenger analysis. We're also using the marginal cost to add buses for each scenario. So going back to that point, the more buses we're adding, the more that number changes. And then of course, the biggest kind of factor in this is what we estimate as the hourly ridership per scenario. If a route is presented that won't have a lot of stops near transit generating uses, then the cost per passenger will likely go down and kind of favor more that low demand Go Zone favorable. So as we kind of take a look at, ISP phase 1, when we removed Go Zone trips, what did this do to the remaining trips that were left? So as you see, this is the current Go Zone boundary with the fiscal year 25 points shown, all the origins and destinations. We see that a lot of these hotspots will be picked up with any of these scenarios or the majority of these scenarios. Looking at the difference in trips, what we saw is that prior to ISP phase 1, we saw an average trip duration and trip distance of 12.88 and 4 miles. So 12 minutes, just over 12 minutes per trip, and an average of 4 miles per trip. After ISP phase 1, we saw that the trip duration increased just by a minute and a half or so. And the trip distance increased just by a fourth mile, like walking distance. So it's not a massive change in trip, but it is a minimal impact. So what can we estimate with ISP phase 3? When we take a look at kind of the all-in scenario and what that looks like, the Go Zone trips that would be removed and converted or pushed over to fixed route, those average trips that we're removing is about 13.9 in terms of a trip duration. So 13.9 minutes and an average trip distance of 3.9. So what that means is that the trips left behind that are more suited to Go Zone, we're seeing a reduction in trip duration at less than a minute. And then the trip distance also goes down, or I should say increases by less than a quarter mile. So that's one thing to consider as we talk about trips removed and how many revenue hours saved. So here's a breakdown here of scenarios 1 through 5. Go Zone trips captured, removed, and how many revenue hours we could potentially save. So we see a range between 28,000 and 52,000 revenue hours. To put that in perspective or put that into scale, one weekday of Connect 7 services at a 20-minute frequency is roughly 27 revenue hours. So that's how we kind of see the comparison of what we're taking away. How does that reflect to bus service, or how does that reflect to potential Go Zone changes? And that kind of brings us to some concepts for the go zone scenarios. Here we'll see go zone scenario 1, which is a potential expansion of Denton service. We've heard a lot from the city of Denton, a lot of requests to go west towards the airport, a lot of shift work next to the industrial areas. Also reach some of our constituents on the northeast side, who are seeking that service. So what this would do is increase the go zone boundary by 19 square miles. This would maintain the current wait time, maintain the seat unavailability, but it expands the go zone area to cover DISD facilities, recreational centers. It increases the area to take up some major distribution. But with this scenario, some of the things that we need to consider are service equity considerations, such as the overall square mileage or transit coverage in the city of Denton, in comparison to the transit coverage or go zone coverage in the cities of Louisville and Highland Village, and as well as the total cost of service. Another potential scenario that we can look at is something that we've talked about a couple times here, which is a reallocation of hours towards the KPIs. To, the point made earlier is we have a lot of levers that we can pull. Could the service hours or revenue hours from Go Zone be redistributed back into the KPIs in our other member cities? How do we maintain 20 minutes of service where there is no fixed route? And that could be by putting them back into our other member cities.
Yeah, Karina, if I could, the team has done a really good job of trying to work within the budget we have to drive towards a 20-minute wait time in Louisville and get seat unavailability as low as possible. In the board packet, the safety service performance data, the last couple of months, we've been running about just over 20 minutes in Louisville and Highland Village on wait time, just by reallocating existing capacity. The goal is 20 minutes, but before we put more service on the street, we want to try to get it as efficient as we possibly can. And so we'll be able to bring the decision point to get it to 20 minutes through this ISP effort.
All right, so the final scenario we're presenting today is an option for an expanded special district in Flower Mound to serve the Highland Village and Louisville zones. This would expand access to hospitals, medical services, additional commercial services, and senior centers. We're finding that when we look at origin and destinations for our member, for the trips out of our member cities of Highland Village and Louisville, there's a lot of requests to go outside the zone to get to important medical appointments and the commercial area there. So with this, there might be some additional considerations of how do we restrict trips to ensure that they're specifically for Highland Village and Louisville customers into that zone, and not for Flower Mound trips.
Thank you for saying that. In order for this to work, we have to have a technology solution that validates who is the rider and what city do they live in to unlock that feature of the app. We've started these conversations with VIA. We think that there is a solution, but we need to be really clear. This will be for use by residents of the member cities of Louisville and Highland Village, and then Denton on Sundays, I suppose, because they would be able to take Go Zone to the southern zone.
Or a train.
Yeah, any time except for Sundays, they should take from Denton, you should take the A train to the Louisville Highland Village zone and take Go Zone. But on Sundays, you can take Go Zone between Denton.
And with that, staff is looking for some direction about, are there any scenarios that we should not move forward with in terms of service in Denton? Are there any Go Zone scenarios that kind of pique your interest more? We should focus our analysis on further. Are there other considerations, other equity considerations staff should weigh more heavily as we refine these scenarios more? So this is just a discussion item today, and we're happy to receive any of your feedback on the information presented. I don't know if there's anything else to add.
So I just want to ask, and I'm assuming that this is what we're discussing, but if we're looking at a scenario where we're adding some routes and then we're capturing over half of our go zone trips we're converting those from go zone over to a bus. There's additional costs associated with a bus, right? And those routes. So I'm assuming that we're not talking about reallocating the entire 56% of those rides to go zone, because then we're keeping our go zone costs the same and increasing our bus costs. So I assume there's gonna be some type of, okay, well, this was our extra cost to get this scenario, so whatever that equals to with go zone, we're gonna take that out, and then whatever's left, we're gonna figure out how to redistribute it, right?
Exactly right. Next month, we'll come back with a view, scenario by scenario of, here's how much go zone capacity could come off the street. And with that nugget of go zone capacity, what do you want to do with it? You could put it in the bank. You could do some of these expansion scenarios that we talked about, service improvement scenarios. So you're saving that go zone money. And then here's the corresponding cost to increase the bus service. And so you'll have the savings on one side and the spend on the other, and you get to figure out how you want to allocate those things. That's exactly what we did in phase one. We said, we think that the bus service is another $500,000 or so to run, and you're going to save 10% of the go zone capacity. And you all chose to take that 10% and go put it in Louisville and Highland Village. So you still spent the money, but you reallocated the resources between the zones. That's what we're going to give you the opportunity to do again.
Do we have any idea of what order of magnitude that may be, and whether we would be able to accommodate just one scenario or multiple scenarios, or?
It's a significant, because of the amount of offset we're talking about, up to like 56% capture, it's a significant chunk of resources. And so that they're preparing a menu of, this option costs you, this go zone option costs you this go zone option costs you this go zone option costs you this is what you have to work with. How do you want to spend it?
Okay.
That's for next month.
Well, then I will hold any further questions. Till next month. I mean, because I honestly, like, really what it gets down to for me would be, well, the three scenarios that are like, okay, they all sound like things that are worth discussing, but without really understanding what order of magnitude each of them would take out of what we have available, it's hard to really, get in. Yeah.
I agree. And what we're just looking for is, are we headed in the right direction? We'll get into the nuts and bolts of it for next month. But because if we showed you the expanding the Denton zone area and you all said, absolutely not, we don't even want to consider it, like we just wouldn't do that work. But the options that we're laying out, you all are saying, yeah, we'd like to learn more and more of the details, and we have those details, and we're refining them, and we'll bring them next month.
Okay.
But you're not opposed to anything that you're seeing so far is the takeaway, is what I'm hearing.
I'm not.
Okay. I'm good. Okay. All right. Thank you, Karina. Oh, sorry.
I'll just speak, I guess. I just want to share, I mean, based on some of the questions we have up here, I like the idea of us prioritizing the ones that capture more go zone, and especially prioritizing the scenarios that I'm looking at slide 26 is on the draft, but it may not be the match for yours. The cost per passenger summary is what I'm looking at right now. Yeah, so that final column, prioritizing the scenarios that have the higher cost differential is something that I would like to see. So, I think, is it scenario 2 and 5 have higher cost ratio difference, but then also just the amount of capture that each one has. So I believe it was scenario 3 that has the highest go zone capture, followed by, I think 4 and 5 are similar. I'm less interested in 1 and 2 because they had such low capture. I think it was 31% and 29% for 1 and 2. So that would just be my general direction and opinion on prioritizing these. And as far as reallocation of go zone, I'm glad that you asked those questions. I was kind of wondering the same thing. So I'm flexible depending on what I see the menu is, because I do want it to be fair, you know, to kind of see what the, not just the service amount, but also what is the cost, like how much cost is Denton getting versus Louisville and Highland Village, and is it comparable, right, to what we're allocating? Otherwise, I'll just say on the Denton scenario of go zone expansion, my priority out of the, if I were to split it into two for the Denton zone, would be the airport, because there's some of our best big jobs are out there, and there's not really a safe way to walk or bike. So if you can't drive there, you don't really have access to those jobs. So that would be my highest priority on that, but it would all depend on, like you said, what's actually available to allocate.
Right.
That's it, thanks.
And thank you for the feedback. It makes total sense. The thing to point out here on those that drive the biggest differential and capture the most, where those say they require a UNT route, it requires year-round operation on a consistent schedule, which we don't do today based on our agreement. So that's where the modification of the agreement conversation comes into play. It's read the way we weigh those factors as well, and those conversations are well underway also.
Anything else? Thank you.
Great.
Moving on to item number 9, discuss local and regional updates and legislative updates. Mr. Christina.
Thank you, sir. I would just say, obviously, lots of news happening in the region related to transits. I continue to be engaged as a spectator in the Transit 2.0 subcommittee conversation, listening to the dialogue and understanding where the region is headed. Back to the conversation we had about the A train, it has a significant impact on DCTA potentially with regard to the connectivity of rail service. And so it behooves us to stay informed and generate helpful ideas where we can to make sure that our network can keep functioning.
Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. Moving on to informational reports. Number 1 is safety and service and ridership reports, and then Denton antique trolley opportunity and others. These are, who's providing these informational reports?
I can roll through them.
Okay.
Really briefly. So safety, service, and ridership, as you found in your packet, overall ridership through the first quarter of the fiscal year is down, driven primarily by a significant decrease in the UNT service that we saw last year. If you split DCTA services out from that, they're up about 5 or 6%, I believe. And so that's encouraging. A train ridership was flat year over year, but we expect that will pick up again in the springtime. We're working with a partner, a private partner who has an antique trolley to donate to us, and we're working with the Denton County folks. Thank you, Board Gonzalez, for your assistance to preserve this piece of Denton County and City of Denton heritage. And so more to follow on that. Task order for roofing assessment. That was a budgeted item for our ELP, just for your information. We're changing P card vendors due to some changes in the contract that we have had. And then the regional transit fare has been updated by the Dallas Area Rapid Transit Board of Directors. Through that process, I think we've come to realize that we have an opportunity to have conversation about setting of that regional fare in the future. And so my intent is to work with my counterparts at DART and Trinity Metro to do just that. And then as we open up our own fare policy conversation, we'll be able to weave that conversation into the DCTA fare structure overall. Happy to answer any questions.
Now, quick question. So, I mean, today, now that they DART made they changed it from 12 to 9, we're still at 12?
If someone buys, when this change is going to take effect, I think in March.
Okay.
And so if someone buys a regional pass from DART, Trinity Metro, or DCTA, we would charge them $9, not 12.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Next, last thing on the agenda is future agenda items or board member requests. Does anybody have anything? All right. There being none, conclude the meeting, and our next board meeting will be February 26th. See y'all then. It is 12:59.